20 years ago, one family was erased in a single night of bloodshed, or so the world believed. Hidden beneath a new name and an ordinary life, the last survivor has no idea that her past is about to find her. But when a man from the family she lost returns to bring her home, love awakens alongside a terrifying truth. The monster who destroyed everything is still waiting inside the family itself. You are listening to a story exclusively narrated on the Dark Romance Stories channel. Relax and step into the world of love stories filled with mystery, emotions, and passion. Don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment to support us. This content is the property of Dark Romance Stories. Please do not copy or re-upload it in any form. The rain came down on New Orleans the way secrets do, slow at first, then all at once, until everything was soaked in something it could not wash away. Marisol Vega stood at the window of her studio above a shuttered jazz bar on Frenchman Street, a paintbrush forgotten between her fingers, watching the water blur the neon into long ribbons of red and gold. She had lived above that bar for 6 years. She knew the sound of the trumpet that played until 2 in the morning, the smell of chicory coffee at dawn, the way the floorboards sighed under her bare feet. She knew the shape of her small, quiet life, the way a person knows the walls of a room they have learned to love in the dark. What she did not know was that a man had been watching her for 11 days. He sat in a black car across the street, engine off, rain sliding down the windshield in sheets he did not bother to clear. He had a photograph on the seat beside him, worn soft at the corners from being held too often. A little girl with dark curls and enormous eyes, 3 years old, laughing at something outside the frame. On the back, in ink that had faded to the colour of old blood, someone had written a single word: Sophia. Rafael Costanzo did not laugh any more. He was not certain he remembered how. But he looked at that photograph, and then he looked up at the lit window where a woman with the same enormous eyes was painting something no one would ever buy, and he felt something move in his chest that he had spent 20 years believing was dead. She was alive. After everything, she was alive. He had come to New Orleans to be sure. Now he was sure. And being sure changed everything. Upstairs, Marisol set the brush down. The painting in front of her was wrong. It had been wrong for 3 days now. A landscape of a house she had never seen but had dreamed of her whole life. A villa on a hill. Cypress trees black against a bruised evening sky, a long white wall. She painted it again and again, in different lights, from different angles, and it was never right, and she never understood why she could not stop. Her therapist, back when she could afford one, had called it a recurring image. Marisol called it a splinter in her mind she could not dig out. She wiped her hands on a rag already stiff with 100 colours and went to make tea. And that was when she heard the knock. Not the buzzer downstairs. The knock. On her actual door. At the top of a private stair that had a locked gate at the bottom. She went very still. People in New Orleans did not simply appear at the top of your stairs. Not good people. She had learned that early, learned it in foster homes and group homes, and the long grey corridors of a childhood that had begun, as far as any record showed, at the age of 3, in a hospital, with no name and no family, and a wristband that said only Jane Doe, approximately 3 years. The knock came again. Twice. Patient. Miss Vega, A man's voice, low, accented. Italian, but softened, the edges worn down. I know you're home. I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here because I've been looking for you for a very long time.
I don't know you, she said through the door, and her voice did not shake, which surprised her. No, he agreed, but I knew you when you were small, before you were Marisol Vega. The tea kettle began, very softly, to sing. Marisol put her hand flat against the door, as if she could feel through the wood what kind of man stood on the other side of it. Her heart was going hard and strange. Before you were Marisol Vega. No one had ever said that to her, because no one had ever known there was a before, not even her. Who are you? She said. It was not a question. She did not have the breath for a question. My name is Rafael Costanzo, he said, and your name, your real name, is Sofia. Sofia Costanzo. You're the last of your family, Sofia, and I'm the man who spent his whole life trying to find out if you survived the night the rest of them died. She opened the door. Later, she would try to explain to herself why. She would tell herself it was foolish, that a woman who had survived what she had survived by trusting no one should not have opened a door to a stranger with a dangerous name. But the truth was simpler and stranger than that. The truth was that when he said Sophia, something in her that had been asleep for 20 years opened its eyes. He was tall, that was the first thing. Tall and dark and dressed in a black suit that had cost more than she made in a year, rain beading on the shoulders of it, and he stood with the terrible stillness of a man who had learned that the world came to those who did not chase it. His face was beautiful and cold, all sharp angles and a mouth that looked as if it had forgotten how to be soft. But his eyes when they found her face, were not cold at all. They moved over her features the way a starving man looks at bread, and there was something in them that was almost pain. You have your mother's eyes, he said quietly. God help me. You have Elena's eyes. I don't know who that is. I know, he said. That's why I'm here. They stood there, the two of them, in the doorway of her small, bright life, while the rain came down and the trumpet did not play, and the kettle screamed to be taken off the flame. And neither of them moved to answer it, because both of them understood, in the way that people understand the truly important things, that the moment they stepped past this threshold, nothing would ever be the way it had been. You should turn off your kettle, Raphael said at last. Marisol laughed, a short, disbelieving sound, half a sob. That's the first thing you say to me? After 20 years? No. His gaze did not leave her face. The first thing I said was your name. This is only the practical thing. And then, so softly, she almost missed it beneath the rain. I didn't think you'd be real. She stepped back to let him in. The door closed behind him with a sound like a held breath finally released. He did not sit until she told him to. That was the second thing Marisol noticed about Rafael Costanzo. The first being that he filled her small studio the way weather fills a valley, entirely, changing the pressure of the air. He stood just inside the door with his hands loose at his sides and waited. And it took her a moment to understand that he was waiting for her permission. A man like that, in a suit like that, asking with his silence to be allowed to sit in her shabby chair.
"Sit," she said. "Please. There's tea." "Thank you." He lowered himself into the armchair by the window, the one with the paint stains and the broken spring she had learned to sit around, and he did it with such unconscious grace that the chair seemed briefly to become something finer than it was. Marisol poured 2 cups, with hands that were not quite steady, and set one in front of him, and then sat as far from him as the room allowed, on the wooden stool at her easel, because she did not yet know if she was frightened. "Tell me," she said, "everything from the beginning, and don't—" Her voice caught. "Don't be gentle about it. I've had my whole life of people being gentle because they thought I couldn't take the truth. I can take the truth. It's the gentleness that's been killing me." Something shifted in his face. It might have been respect. "Your name is Sofia Costanzo," he said. "You were born in Sicily, in a villa above the sea, near a town called Castellamare, into a family that has been powerful, and I will use the honest word because you asked me to, into a family that has been criminal for 100 years. The Costanzo. We were one of the oldest of the Sicilian families to make the crossing to America. By the time you were born, we controlled the ports of 2 cities. We had judges and senators who took our calls, and we had enemies the way a great tree has roots, everywhere, and mostly unseen." Marisol wrapped both hands around her cup. The heat of it was the only thing that felt real. "When you were 3 years old," Raphael went on, and now his voice went flat and careful, the voice of a man walking across ice. "There was a night, a dinner, a reunion. The whole family, 3 generations of us, gathered at the villa for the christening of a cousin's son. 41 people. Your mother Elena, your father Marco, who was to be the next head of the family, your grandfather Don Vincenzo, my mother, my father." He stopped. "I was 9. I was upstairs with a fever, which is the only reason I am sitting in your chair tonight." "Well, what happened?" "Men came," he said, "during the dessert. They came through the kitchen and over the garden wall, and they had automatic weapons, and they had a list, and they went from room to room, and when they were finished, 38 of the 41 were dead." The rain filled the silence. Marisol found she had stopped breathing and made herself start again. 3 survived," he said. "Myself, because I was hidden. My uncle Salvatore, who was not at the villa that night. He was in Palermo on business, or so he said. And you." He looked at her, and the pain came back into his cold eyes. "You were found the next morning by a servant, under the body of your mother. She had covered you with herself. You didn't have a scratch. You were 3 years old, and you had stopped speaking, and you would not speak for 2 years after." Marisol's eyes were burning. "Then how did I end up in a hospital in Louisiana with no name?" "That," Raphael said, "is the question I have spent 20 years, and more money than you can imagine, trying to answer. Someone took you out of Sicily. Someone brought you across an ocean and put you in an American hospital and erased you. Everyone believed you had died with the others. There were 41 place settings, and we recovered 38 bodies, and the other 3 were assumed lost in the fire that was set to cover the killer's escape. I believed it too. Everyone believed it." His jaw tightened. "Everyone except me. Because I remembered carrying you on my shoulders in the garden that afternoon, and I could not make the child I remembered fit into the word dead. So you looked." "So I looked. For 20 years. And 11 days ago, a man I pay to look at faces sent me a photograph of a painter in New Orleans, and I flew here that night, and I have been sitting across the street ever since, trying to find the courage to knock on your door." He set his cup down untouched, because I knew that the moment I did, your life as you have built it would end, and I didn't have the right to take that from you. But I didn't have the strength to leave you undiscovered either. There are people who would use you. There are people who would kill you, Sophia, simply for existing. You are the true heir to everything the Costanzo built. You are, whether you want to be or not, the most dangerous woman in America, and you don't even know your own name." Marisol stood up so fast, the stool clattered behind her. She went to the window and pressed her forehead to the cold glass, and looked down at the wet, gleaming street where his black car still waited. And she thought about the villa she had painted 100 times. Cypress trees, a long white wall, a hill above the sea. "The house I paint," she said, without turning around. "The one with the white wall and the black trees. Is that real?" Behind her she heard him rise. She heard him cross the room, slowly, giving her every chance to tell him to stop. He came to stand beside her at the window, and when he spoke, his voice had gone rough. "That's the villa," he said. "That's home, Sophia. You've been painting your way back to it your whole life." And Marisol Vega, who had never in 20 years let a single person see her cry, put her hand over her mouth and wept. She did not agree to go with him that night. She was not a fool. She told him to leave, and to her surprise he did. But not before he set a phone on her table, a plain black phone, and told her his number was the only one saved in it, and that if anything frightened her, anything at all, she was to call him, and he would come, and she should not doubt for one moment that he would come. Then he was gone, down the stairs and into the rain, and Marisol sat alone in her studio until the sky went grey, staring at the painting of the villa and at the plain black phone, feeling her whole life crack quietly down the middle. She spent the next 2 days trying to prove him a liar. She went to the library. She searched the name Costanzo and the word Massacre and a date 20 years gone, and the internet gave her more than she could bear. Old newspaper photographs of a burning villa on a Sicilian hillside, a wall of names, the phrase, "one of the deadliest mob killings in modern history." She found a grainy family portrait taken the year before the killings. A long table under a pergola, dozens of dark-haired people squinting into the sun, and there, on a beautiful woman's lap, a little girl with enormous eyes and dark curls, laughing. Marisol printed the photograph and held it up beside her own reflection in the bathroom mirror, and her hands shook so hard she had to sit down on the edge of the tub. The woman holding the child had her exact face, 20 years older, dead 20 years. Her mother. She called the number on the black phone at 3 in the morning. "Sophia." He answered on the first ring, wide awake, as if he had been sitting up waiting, as if he had not slept in 11 days. "I need to know one thing," she said, "and I need you to swear it's the truth." "Ask me." "The men who did it, who killed my family." Her voice was very calm now, calm the way the eye of a storm is calm. "Did they ever pay for it?" There was a long silence on the line. When he spoke, his voice had gone to iron. "No," Raphael said. "They didn't. The killers were hired hands, and they were found dead in a Naples warehouse within a month. Someone tied off the loose ends. But the man who ordered it, the man who paid, the man who profited from wiping out 3 generations of Costanzo and stepping into the empty throne," he stopped. "That man was never touched. That man is alive. That man sits at the head of the family to this very day, and he has grown old and fat and untouchable in a chair that should have belonged to your father." Marisol closed her eyes. "You know who it is." "I have suspected for 20 years. I have never been able to prove it, and I have never had a weapon against him worth using. A breath. Until now. Until me. Until you," he admitted, and she heard the terrible honesty of it, the thing he had not wanted to say. "You are the one thing in this world that man fears, Sophia, because you are the proof that he did not finish what he started. You are the heir he thought he'd erased. If you come home, if you stand up in front of the family and claim your blood, there are men, old men, men who loved your father, who would put you in that chair over his dead body. Literally. Do you understand what I'm telling you? You are not just a survivor. You are the beginning of a war." Marisol looked at the printed photograph in her hand, her mother's face, the laughing child that was her. "And if I don't come home," she said, "if I hang up this phone and burn it, and go back to painting a house I'll never see?" "Then you'll be safe for a while," he said, "and I'll never trouble you again. I swore that to myself before I knocked. You have the right to disappear back into your life, and if that's what you want, tell me now, and I'll make certain no one ever finds you. I have the power to do that. It would cost me everything to walk away from you a second time." His voice dropped, and there was something naked in it that made her breath catch. "But I would do it. For you, I would do it." She should have said yes. Burn the phone, go back to the quiet floorboards and the trumpet at 2 in the morning and the small, safe life. But she was looking at her mother's face, and she was thinking of a woman who had thrown her own body over her 3-year-old daughter while men with guns walked through the rooms. And something in Marisol that had been sleeping for 20 years was fully, dangerously awake now, and it would not go back to sleep. "They killed her," Marisol said. "They killed her. And she died protecting me. And the man who ordered it is old and fat and sitting in my father's chair." "Yes." "Come get me," she said. "Tomorrow. I want to go home." She heard him exhale, a long, unsteady breath, 20 years of it. "I'm already downstairs," Raphael said. She went to the window. The black car was there, and he was standing beside it in the rain, phone to his ear, looking up at her window, and even from 4 floors up, she could see that his cold, beautiful face had come undone. "You've been down there this whole time," she said. "Every night since I knocked," he said. "I told you I would come if you were frightened. I couldn't come from very far." Marisol pressed her hand to the glass. Down in the street, slowly, he raised his hand and pressed it to the air, as if he could feel her palm against his. "Come up," she whispered. "It's cold down there." And Raphael Costanzo, who had not been ordered to do anything by anyone in a very long time, obeyed. The private jet smelled of leather and cold air, and faintly of him. Marisol sat by the window, watching the Gulf of Mexico fall away beneath them, an endless hammered sheet of blue, and tried to make her mind hold the impossible shape of the last 3 days. Yesterday, she had been a painter who could not afford a real dentist. Today, she was somewhere over the ocean in an aircraft that belonged to a criminal empire, being carried toward a family she did not remember and a war she did not understand, by a man she had known for 72 hours and could not stop looking at. He sat across the aisle, working through a leather folder of documents, and every so often she felt his gaze touch her and lift away, the way you might test whether a stove was still hot. Neither of them had spoken of the night in her studio, the way he had come up out of the rain and she had let him hold her while she wept, the way he had not tried to make it anything other than what it was. A girl grieving people she had never gotten to know, and a man grieving a child he had never stopped looking for. They had fallen asleep in their clothes on her narrow bed, with the width of a Bible between them, and in the morning it had been strange and easy at once, and she did not have a word for what was happening between them, and neither, she suspected, did he. "Tell me about him," she said. "The man who did it. You've never said his name." Raphael closed the folder. "Because names have power, and I want you to see his face and understand who he is before you let his name into your mind." He paused. "But you should hear it before we land, so it doesn't happen in front of the others." He looked at her. "His name is Salvatore Costanzo. He is your father's uncle, your great-uncle. He is the current head of the family, and he is the man, I believe, murdered your entire bloodline to take the throne." "My own family?" "The worst betrayals always are." Raphael's mouth twisted. "Salvatore was your grandfather's younger brother. Brilliant, patient, and passed over. Your grandfather chose your father as heir, not Salvatore. And Salvatore smiled and kissed your father's cheek and waited 15 years, and then, I believe, he had them all butchered at a christening. He has ruled for 20 years. He calls himself a peacemaker. He gives money to the church. And I have sat at his table 100 times and eaten his food and called him zio, uncle, and smiled, because I had no proof and no weapon." His eyes came to her. "You are the weapon, Sophia. I need you to understand that going in, because he will understand it the moment he sees your face. You are walking into the house of the man who killed your mother, and he will smile at you and kiss your cheek and call you his miracle, his lost lamb come home, and every word will be a lie. And behind his eyes he will already be deciding how to kill you again." Marisol felt cold all the way through. "Then why are we going to him at all? Why not hide? Why not build your case in the dark?" "Because he already knows you're alive." Raphael's voice was grim. "I've been careful, but he has eyes everywhere, and a man who's paid to watch faces can be paid twice. I have to assume he knows, and if he knows, then hiding you only means he finds you somewhere with no witnesses. But if I bring you home in the light, in front of the whole family, publicly, as the miracle survivor, then he can't touch you without every old capo in that house asking who would want the last Costanzo daughter dead. I'm not hiding you from him, Sophia. I'm putting you somewhere he can't reach you, in the middle of a crowd of people who will want to protect you because your blood is holier than his." He leaned forward. You are safest standing directly in front of the man who wants you dead. It's the one place his knife can't reach. She stared at him. That's insane. That's the family, he said simply. You'll learn the difference is small. Marisol turned back to the window. Somewhere ahead, past the curve of the world, was a city she had never consciously seen, and a house full of strangers who shared her blood, and an old man who would kiss her cheek and plan her death. And you, she said quietly, where do you stand in all of this? You're the last Costanzo man. If I'm the true heir and I die, who inherits? The silence went on a beat too long. I do, Raphael said. If you die, Sophia, everything passes to me. I am the next in the blood after you. I want you to know that. I want you to know it from my own mouth, before someone whispers it in your ear as poison. He held her gaze without flinching. The man bringing you home has more to gain from your death than anyone alive except Salvatore himself. You have every reason not to trust me. I'm telling you this because I'd rather you doubt me and stay alive than trust me blindly and die of it. Marisol looked at him for a long time. This cold, dangerous man who had wept in her doorway, who had slept beside her with a Bible's width between them, who had just handed her the knife pointed at his own throat. You could have lied, she said. Yes. Why didn't you? Raphael was quiet. When he answered, it was not the answer of a man who calculated things. Because I have spent 20 years unable to forgive myself for being alive when everyone I loved died, he said. And you are the only person left who was there. You are the only one who could possibly understand. I will not begin the one relationship that matters to me with a lie. Doubt me all you want, Sophia. I'd rather have your suspicion than anyone else's love. The plane flew on, into the north, into the dark, and neither of them said anything more. But when the turbulence came an hour later and rattled the cabin, she found that at some point she had reached across the aisle, and her hand was in his, and he was holding it, as if it were the only thing keeping the aircraft in the sky. The Costanzo estate sat on 200 acres of the Hudson Valley, an hour north of Manhattan, behind a wall that ran for a mile and a gate that had been forged in Sicily and shipped across an ocean. It was not a house. It was a fortress pretending to be a house, pale stone and black iron, cypress trees imported and coaxed to grow in the wrong climate, a long white wall. Marisol saw the wall from the car and stopped breathing. You painted it from memory, Raphael said quietly, watching her face. This is a copy. Salvatore built it 15 years ago after he took power, an exact replica of the villa in Sicily, the one that burned, the one where they died. He rebuilt the house where he murdered them. He calls it honoring their memory. He calls it a trophy, Marisol said, and Raphael looked at her with something like startled approval, because that was exactly the word, and she had found it in 3 seconds, where he had circled it for 20 years. The car passed through the gate. Men in dark suits stood at intervals along the drive, and each of them turned to watch the car pass with the flat, assessing stare of professional violence, and each of them, when they saw who was inside, did something with their faces that Marisol did not understand until Raphael explained it. They know, he murmured,
Look at them. They've heard. The whole house knows the miracle is coming home. His jaw tightened. That's good. That's protection. It also means we have perhaps 1 hour before Salvatore has decided what to do about you. The car stopped. The great doors of the house opened, and Marisol Costanzo, because that was who she was now, whether she was ready or not, stepped out of the car and onto the gravel of her family's stolen home, and 40 people were waiting on the steps to see her. She would remember it always in pieces, an old woman in black who took one look at her face and made the sign of the cross and began silently to weep. A hard-faced man of 60 with a scar through his eyebrow who went down on one knee, actually down on the gravel, and bowed his head and said in a broken voice, "Signorina, you have your father's chin. Madonna, you have Marco's chin." Younger men who stared, a beautiful woman in red who watched her with narrow, calculating eyes and did not weep at all. And then the crowd parted, the way water parts around a stone, and an old man came down the steps. He was smaller than she had imagined. That was her first thought, and it frightened her, because she had built him in her mind into a monster the size of the sky, and here he was, a soft-bellied old man in a cardigan, with kind eyes and a full head of silver hair and a smile that reached all the way to the corners of his face. He came toward her with his arms already opening, tears already standing in his eyes, and the whole crowd watched, and Marisol understood in a rush of nausea that this was theatre, that every gesture was a performance for the capos on the steps, and that she was expected to perform her part too. "Sophia," Salvatore Costanzo said, and his voice cracked beautifully on the name. "Sophia, my brother's blood, come home to us at last. In 20 years I never dared to hope." And he took her face in his 2 soft old hands, and he kissed her forehead, and he held her against his chest while the family wept and murmured, and into her ear, so quietly that no one else on earth could have heard it, so quietly it might have been the wind, he said, "You should have stayed dead, little one. Now I have to do it twice." Then he stepped back, beaming, tears on his cheeks, and turned to the assembled family and threw his arms wide and cried out, "The last daughter of Costanzo has come home. Tonight we feast." And the family roared its joy, and someone began to weep the rosary aloud, and the beautiful woman in red smiled a small, cold smile, and Raphael's hand closed hard around Marisol's elbow, steadying her, because he had seen her face go white and did not know why. She could not tell him why. Not there. Not in the middle of 40 people. She could only stand in the sunshine, held by the man who had murdered her mother, and smile. "You should have stayed dead, little one. Now I have to do it twice." She smiled, and understood that the war Raphael had promised her had already begun, that it had begun in a whisper, in front of everyone, where no one could hear, and that she was going to have to become someone entirely new, and very quickly, if she wanted to live long enough to see it end. Raphael leaned close, under the noise. "What did he say to you?" Marisol turned her head and looked up into the cold, beautiful, worried face of the only person in this house of strangers that she had chosen, and she made a decision that would shape everything that came after.
He said he was glad I was alive,
she lied.
He said his brother would have wept to see me.
She was not ready to hand Raphael the knife pointed at Salvatore's throat. Not yet. Not until she was certain, all the way to the bottom of herself, whose side he was truly on. He had told her he inherited everything if she died. She would not forget that. She could not afford to forget that. She was learning already. The family teaches you fast, or it buries you. They gave her a room in the east wing, the largest guest suite in the house, with windows that looked over the copied garden toward the long white wall. Marisol understood the choice was not kindness. It was distance. The east wing was far from the family's private rooms, far from the wing where Salvatore slept, and it had, she noticed, only one stair down and a single door at the bottom of it. Easy to watch, easy to seal. She sat on the edge of the enormous bed and did not unpack. There was a knock, soft, and before she could answer, the door opened and the beautiful woman in red came in without waiting. She had changed for the evening into black now, and up close she was older than she'd looked on the steps. 40, perhaps, with a clever, hard face and eyes that went over Marisol like a jeweller's loop. "So," the woman said, "the miracle." She shut the door. "I'm Gia, Salvatore's daughter, which makes me your, what, second cousin? The family tree is a thorn bush, don't try to climb it." She sat down, uninvited, in the chair by the window and crossed her legs. "I came to give you some advice, since no one else in this house will tell you the truth, and you look like a woman who'd rather have it." "I would." "Good. Here it is." Gia tilted her head. "Everyone downstairs is weeping over you because your existence is very convenient for them and very inconvenient for my father, and people love nothing more than a stick to beat a king with. They don't love you. They don't know you. By tomorrow, half of them will be wondering whether it might be simpler if the miracle had a small accident, and the other half will be plotting to marry you off to their sons so your holy blood improves their branch of the thorn bush." She studied Marisol. "And Raphael. You should be careful about Raphael most of all." Marisol kept her face still. "Why?" "Because you're already looking at him the way a woman looks at a man she's decided to be stupid about," Gia said, not unkindly. "And because he is the last Costanzo man, and he has spent 20 years as the heir presumptive, and you have just walked in and taken that away from him with your existence, and now the only thing standing between Raphael Costanzo and everything he's waited his whole life for is you. Breathing." She let that sit. "He found you. He brought you here. He's very good at seeming like the one honest man in a house of liars. Ask yourself who benefits most if you're loved and trusted, and then, tragically, killed by our enemies before you can produce an heir of your own." She rose, smoothed her dress. "I'm not saying he did anything. I'm saying you're a lamb who's been told exactly one wolf is dangerous, and I want you to remember that this whole house is wolves. Even the pretty ones. Especially the pretty ones." She went to the door, then paused with her hand on it. "My father asked me to look in on you," Gia said, almost carelessly. "So now I've looked. I'll tell him you seem overwhelmed and grateful and no trouble at all. That's the version that keeps you alive longest." And she was gone. Marisol sat very still in the enormous room and felt the walls of the trap she was in, and understood that Gia had just done two things at once: warned her and poisoned her against the one ally she had, and that she had no way of knowing which was the true purpose and which the cover. The family teaches you fast. There was a second knock an hour later, and this one she knew. Raphael came in and shut the door and stood with his back against it, and the sight of him did something to the tightness in her chest that she resented and could not stop. He had changed for dinner into a darker suit, and he looked tired in a way she had not seen on the plane, as if being inside this house cost him something with every breath. "Gia came to see you," he said. It was not a question. "You had someone watching my door." "I have everyone watching your door," he said flatly. "It's the only thing keeping you alive." "What did she tell you?" Marisol looked at him. She thought of what Gia had said. The only thing standing between Raphael and everything he's waited for is you, breathing. And she watched his face for the lie, and she could not find it. And she hated that she was looking, and she hated more that she had to. "She told me not to trust you," Marisol said. "She told me you have the most to gain from my death of anyone in this house, except her father." Raphael did not flinch. He had told her the same thing himself, on the plane, in his own words. "She's right," he said. "I do. I told you that. I'll tell you again every day if you need me to." He crossed the room to her, slowly, and went down on one knee in front of where she sat, so that for the first time she was looking down at him, at the cold, beautiful face gone open and raw. "But Gia didn't tell you why she came, Sophia. She came because her father sent her. Salvatore is testing the water. He's using his daughter to drive a wedge between you and me, because he knows that alone I can't protect you, and together we are the one thing in this house he can't manage. Divide us, and you're a lamb in a room full of wolves. Keep us together, and you're a Costanzo daughter with the last Costanzo son at your back, and even Salvatore has to move carefully around that." "And if she's right? If you are the wolf?" He was silent a moment. Then he took her hand, asking, always asking, giving her the room to pull away, and he pressed her palm flat against his chest, over his heart, and held it there. "Then kill me," he said simply. "You have my knife already. I gave it to you on the plane. If I ever make you afraid, if I ever give you one true reason, you take everything I've told you to the old capos who loved your father, and you finish me, and I won't lift a hand to stop you. I would rather die by your suspicion than live having betrayed you. I have buried everyone else I've ever loved, Sophia. I am not going to bury you, too. Not for a chair, not for anything." His heart was going hard and fast under her hand. She could feel it. You could fake a lot of things in this family, she was learning. She did not think you could fake that. "You said loved," she whispered. Raphael went very still. "Everyone you've ever loved," she said. "You put me in that sentence." He did not take it back. That was the thing she would remember. He did not soften it, or explain it away, or pretend she'd misheard. He knelt there in the trap of that house, with her hand over his hammering heart, and he looked up at her and let her see it, all of it.
the thing that had been growing in him since a lit window on Frenchman Street. "Yes," he said, "I did." The feast was held in the great hall, a room built to overawe, with a table that could seat 60 and a fire big enough to roast a man. Marisol was placed at Salvatore's right hand, in the seat of honour, and Raphael was placed at the far end of the table, as far from her as the room allowed, and she understood that this too was a message. I decide who sits near the miracle. And she understood that Salvatore missed nothing, because when Raphael's jaw tightened at the seating, the old man caught it and smiled into his wine. They ate for 3 hours. The family paraded past her in shifts, old men who had served her grandfather, women who had known her mother, each of them with a story, a memory, a fragment of the life that had been stolen from her. An ancient capo named Tommaso, the one who had knelt on the gravel, sat with her for a long time and told her about her father. How Marco Costanzo had once driven 4 hours in the rain to sit with a dying soldier's mother. How he had wept at christenings. How he had believed, God help him, that the family could be made clean in a generation or two, could put down the gun and pick up only the legitimate businesses, could become merely rich instead of merely feared. "That is why they killed him," Tommaso said, very low, his old eyes wet. "Not for the money, for the mercy. Your father was going to make us weak," they said. "Your father was going to end us. So someone ended him first." He looked at her, and then, deliberately, he looked down the table at Salvatore, and then back at her, and he said nothing at all, and it was the loudest thing anyone had said to her all night. Salvatore rose to make a toast. He spoke beautifully, about blood, about miracles, about the mercy of God who had spared one small daughter from the fire so that the family might be made whole. He wept as he spoke. Real tears, or tears real enough. He raised his glass to Sofia Costanzo, "Come home," and 60 voices roared her name, and she sat in the seat of honour and smiled and raised her own glass and thought, "You told me to my face that you'd kill me twice, and now you're weeping over me in front of 60 people, and every single one of them believes you. And that is what I am up against." After the toast, Salvatore leaned close, under the noise, the way he had on the steps. "You're wondering why I'd say such a thing to you this afternoon," he murmured, still smiling for the room. "In the driveway. Now I have to do it twice." He patted her hand where it lay on the table, a fond old uncle. "I'll tell you why, child. Because I wanted you to know that I know. I could have played the loving uncle and let you wonder for months, but I respect you too much for that. You're a Costanzo. You deserve to understand your position. So here it is, plainly, between us." His voice was warm as a hearth. "You are a danger to everything I have built. You will always be a danger simply by existing, and so you will die. Not tonight. Tonight would be crude, and I am not a crude man. But soon, and cleanly, and in a way that makes me weep at your funeral. I'm telling you this because I want you to spend whatever time you have left knowing that there is nothing you can do. You have no proof. You have no power. You have one frightened cousin who loves you and who inherits everything when you're gone. Think on that, child. Think on how convenient your death is for the boy who found you. And you have me, smiling at you, in front of everyone who could ever protect you. He lifted his glass again to a passing capo, beaming. "Welcome home, Sophia. Enjoy the party. It's for you." Marisol looked at him. Her hand did not shake. She was surprised to find her hand did not shake. "You're right," she said softly, smiling too, for the room. "I have no proof. Not yet." She turned her head and met his kind old eyes, and she let him see for 1/2 of 1 second the thing that had woken up in her studio and would not go back to sleep. "But you made a mistake tonight, Zeal. You told a painter she was a lamb. And a painter spends her whole life learning to see the thing that's really there under the thing everyone else agrees to see. You've been performing grief so long, you've forgotten there's someone in the room actually watching your face." She lifted her glass to him, and her smile was genuine now, and that was what unsettled him. She could see it unsettle him. "I'm going to learn everything, Salvatore. Every account, every man you paid, every loose end you tied off. And then I'm going to weep at your funeral. Enjoy the party. There'll be so few more." For one moment, one single moment, the warmth went out of the old man's eyes, and she saw what was underneath, and it was not human at all. It was the flat, patient nothing of a thing that has killed 40 people and slept well after. Then the mask came back, the tears, the trembling smile, and he squeezed her hand and turned to weep with joy at another capo, and the moment was gone, as if it had never happened. But it had happened. She had seen him, and he had seen that she had seen him. Down at the far end of the table, Raphael was watching her face the way he always watched her face, and he had gone very still, because he could not hear the words, but he could read her, and he knew. He knew that something had just been decided, some line crossed, and he did not yet know what, and it was killing him not to know. She found his eyes down the length of the table, past 60 of her weeping, plotting, dangerous relatives, and she held them, and slowly, so only he would understand, she lifted her glass an inch off the table toward him. "I choose you," the gesture said, "whatever the cost. I choose you." And Raphael Costanzo, at the far, cold end of a murderer's table, lifted his glass an inch in return, and for the first time in 20 years, something that might almost have been hope moved across his beautiful, ruined face. He came to her room after midnight, when the house had finally gone quiet. She had known he would. She had left the door unlocked, which in that house was either an invitation or a death wish, and possibly both. And she had been sitting at the window in the dark, looking at the long white wall, when she heard the door and did not turn around. "Tell me what he said to you," Raphael said. "The truth this time. You lied to me on the steps, Sophia. Don't insult us both by doing it again. I watched your face at dinner. Something happened. Tell me." So she told him. All of it. The whisper on the gravel. "You should have stayed dead. Now I have to do it twice." The toast. What Salvatore had said under the noise, the whole patient, monstrous confession of it, the way he'd tried to poison her against Raphael in the same breath. And then she told him what she'd said back, and she watched him go pale, and then flush, and then very still. "You threatened him," Raphael said. You sat at his right hand, unarmed, with no proof, no power, no protection except the goodwill of people who met you 6 hours ago, and you looked Salvatore Costanzo in the eye and told him you'd weep at his funeral. Yes. He crossed the room in 3 strides, and she thought for a wild moment he was angry, that he was going to shout, and instead he took her face in his hands, hard, urgent, nothing gentle about it now, and he kissed her.
It was not a soft kiss. It was 20 years of buried grief, and 11 days of a car in the rain, and one endless dinner spent at the wrong end of the table, watching her from too far away. He kissed her like a man who had just watched the only thing he loved walk to the edge of a cliff and lean over, and Marisol, who had spent her whole life keeping people at the length of an arm, fisted her hands in his lapels and pulled him closer and kissed him back like the studio was on fire and he was the only door. When they broke apart, they were both breathing hard. "Don't," he said against her mouth. His voice was wrecked. "Don't you ever. Do you understand what he is? Do you understand what he does to people who threaten him? I have spent 20 years staying alive in this house by making myself small, by never once letting him see that I suspect him. And you've been here 9 hours, and you've declared war to his face. Because someone has to," Marisol said. "Because you've been small for 20 years, and it hasn't gotten you justice. It's gotten you a seat at the far end of the table. Because my mother threw her body over mine, while men with guns walked through the rooms, and I am not going to survive that, just to spend the rest of my life being careful." She was crying now, and did not care. "He killed everyone, Raphael. He killed everyone, and he weeps at their graves and gives money to the church, and everyone loves him. Someone has to see him." Someone has to say it out loud, even in a whisper, even with no proof. Someone has to be the person in the room who isn't fooled. And I've spent my whole life being nobody, being erased, being a Jane Doe with no name. I would rather die with my name than live without it. He took Sofia Costanzo from me once. He does not get to make me small the way he made you small. I won't let him. Raphael pressed his forehead to hers and shut his eyes, and she felt him shaking. "You're going to get yourself killed," he whispered. "Then help me get him first." He pulled back and looked at her, and something changed in his face. Some long-held brace finally releasing. Some decision 20 years in the making finally, terribly made. "There's a room," he said, "in the old wing. Salvatore's study, the private one, not the one he uses for show. He keeps the real records there. Not on any computer, he doesn't trust them. On paper, in a safe, the old Sicilian way. 20 years of it, every account, every payment. If he kept anything about that night, anything that ties him to the men who did it, it's there. I've never been able to get into it. He changes the combination every month, and there are 2 men on that door around the clock." He took a breath. "But there's a party in 3 weeks, the Feast of San Gennaro. The family throws it every year. The whole organization comes, 300 people, the house full of strangers, the guards spread thin. It's the one night the study isn't watched by his best men, because his best men are on the guests." He looked at her. "It's the one night we might get in. And it's also, I'd bet my life, the night he's planning to have you die. A beautiful public accident in a crowd with 300 witnesses to swear it wasn't murder. He as good as told you tonight. Soon and cleanly, and in a way that makes me weep at your funeral. That's the night, Sophia.
San Gennaro. "Then that's the night we finish it," she said. He laughed, a short, broken, disbelieving sound, and pulled her against him and held her so tightly it hurt, and neither of them let go for a long time. "You are going to be the death of me," he murmured into her hair. "Or the making of you," she said. Outside the window, the long white wall gleamed in the dark, and somewhere on the other side of the house, an old man lay awake in the copy of the room where he had murdered his family, thinking his own patient thoughts, and the great machine of the war ground slowly, silently, into its first true motion. In the 3 weeks that followed, 2 things grew in the Costanzo house at the same time, in secret, in the dark, and neither could be stopped. The first was the plan. Raphael brought it to her in pieces, always at night, always in her room, with the door locked and the water running in the bathroom to foul any listening device. The family had taught him 100 small paranoias, and he taught them all to her. He drew the old wing from memory on the back of a painting. He named the 2 guards on the study door and their weaknesses. One drank, one had a sick child and could be moved. He explained the safe, an antique Sicilian strongbox with a combination Salvatore changed on the 1st of every month, and how the old man kept the combination nowhere but in his head, which meant they could not steal it, which meant they would have to be inside the study on a night when the safe was already open, which meant San Gennaro, when Salvatore made his one annual withdrawal to pay the tribute of the visiting families in cash, in the old way, from that very safe. "He opens it once a year," Raphael said, "on the feast to pay the tribute. That's our window. Minutes, maybe, while the safe is open and the guards are pulled to the crowd. And if we're caught, then we don't leave that room alive," he said simply, "so we won't be caught." The second thing that grew was harder to name and impossible to stop, and it frightened Marisol more than the safe. She was falling in love with him. Not the way it happened in the films she had watched alone in her studio, slower than that, and stranger. It happened in the small hours, over the drawing on the back of a painting, when he explained a thing twice because he saw she hadn't understood, and never once made her feel stupid for it. It happened when she woke screaming from a dream she couldn't remember, men walking through rooms, a weight of a body over her, the smell of smoke, and found him already there, having heard her through the wall, sitting on the floor with his back against her bed, keeping watch. And he did not touch her or speak. He only said, "I'm here." "You're in the East Wing. It's the year of our Lord. You're 23 years old, and no one is coming through that door." Until her breathing slowed. It happened when she painted. She had brought her paints, could not have left them. And he sat and watched her work for hours, and said once, so quietly she nearly missed it, "My mother painted. Did you know that? Elena told me once. Your grandmother painted. It skipped, and now it's come back in you." And she had had to put down the brush, because she could not see the canvas any more. He was possessive in a way that should have alarmed her, and instead, God help her, did not. When a young capo's son named the family too openly at dinner and let his eyes travel over her too slowly, Raphael did not raise his voice. He simply appeared at her shoulder and put one hand flat on the small of her back, claiming, unmistakable,
and looked at the young man with the flat, dead calm he must have learned surviving this house, and the young man went white and found somewhere else to be. Later, she said, "You didn't have to do that. I can handle a boy who stares." And Raphael said, "I know you can. I did it for me, not for you. I'm not sorry." And the honesty of it, the raw, unashamed want of it, did something molten to her insides. "You're jealous," she said. "I've been alone for 20 years, he said. "I found the one person on earth who understands what I've lost, and I have to watch 300 wolves circle her and pretend I'm calm. Yes, I'm jealous. I'm jealous of the way that boy got to look at you for 4 seconds. I told you I wouldn't lie to you." He looked at her with those cold eyes gone molten. "If that frightens you, tell me now, and I'll never touch you again, and I'll still lay down my life for you. But don't ask me to pretend I don't feel it. I've done enough pretending in this house to last me forever." It did not frighten her. That was the thing she could not explain to herself in the dark. A man that intense, that consuming, should have set off every alarm a childhood like hers had installed. Instead, it felt like the first warm room she had ever been let into. All her life she had been the girl no one came looking for. And here was a man who had looked for 20 years, who watched her door with everyone he had, who was jealous of 4 seconds of a stranger's gaze. And underneath the danger of it, there was a devotion so total it undid her. They did not sleep together. Not yet. It was Raphael who held the line, which surprised her, until the night she reached for him, and he caught her hands and pressed his lips to her knuckles and said, "Not here, not in his house, not while there's a chance I lose you in 3 weeks. When I have you, Sophia, I want it to be somewhere I know you're going to wake up. I've buried everyone I've ever loved. I'm not going to touch you for the first time in a house where I might have to bury you too. Ask me again when we're free. Ask me again, and I won't be able to say no to you about anything, ever, for the rest of my life." She asked him again on the night before San Gennaro, and he did not say no. The morning of the feast, everything was almost lost because of Gia. Marisol came down early to the empty kitchen for coffee and found Salvatore's daughter already there in the grey light, drinking wine at 7 in the morning. And Gia looked up at her with red eyes and said, "Sit down. I have to tell you something, and I only have the courage for it once." Marisol sat. "I've watched you for 3 weeks," Gia said. "You and Raphael, creeping around at night, running the water, drawing maps on the backs of your little paintings. Yes, I know. I've been in your room. Everyone's been in your room. This is that kind of family. You're planning something for tonight. Don't bother denying it. I don't care what it is. I don't want to know the details, because what I don't know, I can't be tortured into saying." She drank. "I came to warn you. My father knows you're planning something. He doesn't know what, but he's not going to wait to find out." Her hand was shaking around the glass. "He's moved it up. Whatever he was going to do to you tonight, in the crowd, he's decided he can't risk you moving first. He's going to do it this afternoon, before the guests arrive. He's going to take you to the wall, the white wall, in the garden, where he walks with family to talk privately. And there are going to be 2 men there, and it's going to look like our enemies got over the wall.
and he is going to weep at your funeral tomorrow exactly the way he planned, only a day early." Marisol's coffee had gone cold in her hands. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I'm a coward," Gia said. And now the tears came, ugly and real. "Because I've been a coward my whole life. I've known what he is since I was 15 years old. I found the photographs. I found the accounts. I know. I've always known. And I've eaten his food and taken his money and called him Papa and said nothing for 30 years because I was afraid. And because a part of me told myself it was long ago and none of my business, and the dead were dead." She looked up at Marisol with a face full of a lifetime's self-loathing. "And then you walked in the door. A 3-year-old who lived under her mother's body. And you've been here 3 weeks, and you've already found more courage than I've had in a lifetime. And I can't watch him do it again. I can't stand at another graveside and weep for someone he killed and say nothing. Not again. Not you." She reached into her coat and put something on the table between them. A small brass key, old, worn. "What is this?" "The study," Gia said. "The real one. He thinks the only key is in his head. The combination to the safe, yes, he changes that. But the door has a lock, an old-fashioned one, and there's a second key, my grandfather's, that Papa never knew survived. My mother gave it to me before she died. She was like your father, you know. She wanted us clean. I think that's why she died so young." Gia pushed the key across the table. "Everything's in there. Photographs, ledgers, a letter. There's a letter, Sophia, in your grandfather's hand that names Salvatore. That Salvatore never found because it was hidden inside the frame of a painting my mother left in that room. Your grandfather knew. At the end, your grandfather knew his brother was going to move against him, and he wrote it down, and he hid it, and he died before he could use it." She wiped her face. "It's yours now. Your inheritance. The only one that matters. Take it and destroy my father before he destroys you." Marisol closed her hand around the key. It was warm from Gia's pocket. "Come with us," she said. "Tonight, when it's done, come with us and testify." "No." Gia stood, gathered herself, became again the cool, hard woman from the first night. "I'm too much a coward to stand in the light, and I'm too much his daughter to be believed. But I can do this one thing in the dark. Let me do this one thing." She went to the door, then stopped. "This afternoon, the wall. He'll invite you to walk with him after lunch, all fatherly, just the two of you and the garden. You have to not be here. You have to be somewhere with witnesses, somewhere he can't take you aside. Do you understand? Stay in the crowd. Stay near Raphael. Whatever you do, do not walk to the wall with my father this afternoon, or you will not live to use that key." And she was gone. And Marisol sat alone in the grey kitchen, with a dead woman's key warm in her fist, and understood that the war had just accelerated, that the safe plan of 3 weeks had collapsed into a single afternoon, that Salvatore was going to try to kill her before the party rather than during it, and that she now had, hidden in her hand, the only thing that could destroy him first. She found Raphael in the garden and told him everything, fast, low, under the noise of the caterers setting up for the feast. And she watched the calculation move behind his eyes, and then the fear, and then last, a cold and total resolve. "Then we go in this morning," he said, "now, while he thinks he has until this afternoon, before the guests, before the wall, before any of it. He's expecting to move first, so we move first." He took her face in his hands quickly and kissed her forehead, the way Salvatore had, except that when Raphael did it, it did not feel like a lie. "Stay in the crowd until I come for you. Do not let him get you alone. Do not walk to that wall. Say yes to me, Sophia. Say it." "Yes," she said. "Good." He was already moving, already becoming someone harder and faster, the man this house had made him. "Then let's go rob a dead man's brother." The old wing smelled of dust and beeswax and something older underneath, the smell of a house that had absorbed too much. They went while the house was in the chaos of the feast's preparation. Florists and caterers and hired staff streaming through the main halls, 300 place settings, a stage being built in the ballroom for the band. In all that noise, 2 members of the family, walking with purpose through the old wing, were invisible. Raphael had timed it to the minute. The drinking guard had been sent to oversee the wine deliveries. The guard with the sick child had been given the morning off, a small mercy Raphael had arranged weeks ago against exactly this moment. The study door stood unwatched for the first time in memory. Gia's key turned in the lock with a click that seemed loud as a gunshot. Inside, the room was a mausoleum of another century. Dark wood, a globe, a wall of leather ledgers, a great desk, and above the desk a painting of the villa in Sicily, the real one, the one that had burned. And in the corner, squat and black and iron-bound, the Sicilian strongbox. "It's locked," Marisol whispered. "The safe. He hasn't opened it. He doesn't open it until tonight, for the tribute." "We don't need the safe," Raphael said, already moving to the painting. "Gia said the letter's in a frame. Your grandmother hid it in a painting, and she'd hide it in the one that mattered, the villa. Help me." They lifted the great heavy painting of the burned villa off its hooks and turned it face down on the desk, and Raphael's fingers went over the back of the frame, pressing, testing. And Marisol watched the door, and her heart tried to climb out of her throat. And then she heard him make a sound, low in his chest, and she turned, and he had found it. A false panel in the thick old frame, and inside it, wrapped in oilcloth gone stiff with age, a bundle of papers. He unwrapped it with shaking hands. Photographs first, and Marisol had to press her fist to her mouth because they were photographs of the aftermath, of the villa the morning after, of things no one should ever see, and there among them was one that stopped her heart entirely, a photograph of a servant carrying a small child out of the ruins, a little girl with dark curls staring at nothing. And on the back, in a hand she would later learn was her grandfather's oldest servant's, "La piccola vive." The little one lives. Get her out before Salvatore knows. "That's why you were erased," Raphael breathed, looking over her shoulder. "It wasn't enemies who took you out of Sicily and hid you in America. It was someone who loved your family, hiding you from Salvatore. They knew he'd finish you, so they made you disappear so completely that even he believed you dead." He looked at her, stunned. "Someone in this family saved your life twice, Sophia. Once your mother's body, once a servant's love. and then they buried you so deep to keep you safe that it took me 20 years to dig you out." And then Raphael lifted the last paper and went utterly still. It was a letter. 2 pages in a strong, old-fashioned hand, and even in Italian Marisol could read the signature at the bottom. Vincenzo Costanzo. Her grandfather. The Dom. Raphael read it aloud, translating in a low, unsteady voice. And it was the voice of a dead man reaching 20 years across a grave. "To whoever finds this, if I am not alive to speak. My brother Salvatore intends to kill me and take the family. I have seen the signs, the meetings I am not told of, the men he brings in from Naples, the way he looks at my son, Marco. I have no proof he would move so far as blood, and so I cannot act. The family would not follow me against my own brother on suspicion alone. But I set this down so that the truth survives me. Salvatore has made a deal with the Ferrante family of Naples. He will give them the ports in exchange for the men to do a thing that cannot be undone. If you are reading this, then he has done it, and everyone I love is dead. And I ask only this, that someone, someday, makes him answer. He will hide behind the family. He will weep at our graves. Do not believe the weeping. Vincenzo Costanzo, in fear and in sorrow, before God." The room was very quiet. Somewhere far off, the caterers laughed. "The Ferrante," Raphael said slowly. "The ports. Sophia, this is it. This is everything. Your grandfather names him, names the deal, names the family he made it with. And the Ferrante are still alive, still in Naples, still furious that Salvatore never gave them the ports he promised. Everyone in the organization knows there's bad blood between Costanzo and Ferrante. They've just never known why." This letter tells them why. This letter proves Salvatore ordered the massacre and then cheated the men who carried it out. Do you understand what this does? This doesn't just prove it to us. This is a weapon we can put in the hands of every enemy Salvatore has. The old capos who loved your father. The Ferrante who feel betrayed. This letter ends him. Marisol took the letter from his hands and held it, this thin, brittle paper written by a frightened, dying man who had loved her before she could remember. And she understood that she was holding her family's justice in her 2 hands, and her eyes burned. And then the study door opened. Not Salvatore. Worse, in a way, and stranger, it was the ancient couple, Tommaso, the one who had knelt on the gravel, the one who had told her about her father's mercy. He stood in the doorway with a gun in his old hand, and his face was grey with grief, and he said, "I'm sorry, Signorina. I'm so sorry. He knows about the key. Gia's dead. He made her tell him where she sent you before he—" His voice broke. "He's coming. I came ahead to— I don't know what I came to do. I've served this family 50 years. I knelt for your father on the gravel." He was weeping now, this old killer, the gun trembling. "Please, whatever's in your hand, whatever the old Don wrote, let it be true. Let it be worth what it's cost. Because I cannot serve that man one more day." And he lowered the gun and turned it in his hand and offered it to her, grip first.
and behind him in the corridor they heard the unhurried footsteps of a man who had all the time in the world. Gia was dead.
Marisol did not have time to feel it. That would come later, in the dark, in a flood that would nearly drown her. But in the moment the words landed, she felt something in her go cold and clear and terribly calm, the way it had gone at the dinner table, the eye of the storm. Gia, who had been a coward her whole life and found her courage at the very end and paid for it inside of an hour. Gia, who had said, "Let me do this one thing in the dark." She had done it, and it had killed her. "Take the gun," Raphael said, low and urgent, moving to put himself between Marisol and the door. "Sophia, take it, get behind me, and whatever happens, do not let go of that letter." She took the gun. It was heavier than she'd imagined. Tommaso stepped aside, pressing his back to the bookshelves, an old man out of moves, and the footsteps in the corridor stopped, and Salvatore Costanzo walked into his own violated study as calmly as if he'd come for a book. He was not smiling now. That was the thing that frightened her most. The mask was finally, entirely gone, and what stood in its place was simply a very old, very tired, very intelligent man who had killed everyone in his way for 50 years and was mildly annoyed to have to do it once more. "My daughter," he said, "died badly. I want you to know that, Sophia, since you're the reason." She wept and she begged, and she called me Papa right up until the end, and I did it myself, with my own hands, because some things a father owes his child. His eyes went to the letter in her fist. Ah, so the old woman's ghost had a card after all. Elena hid something in a frame. I always wondered why she loved that painting so. He sighed. "Vincenzo's letter, is it? My brother's little confession. I looked for that for 20 years. He held out his hand. "Give it to me, child, and I'll make your death gentle. A great deal more gentle than Gia's. That's the only offer left on the table." "You had them all killed," Marisol said. Her voice did not shake. 40 people, at a christening, because my father wanted to make the family clean. Because your father was a fool who was going to destroy in a decade what our blood built in a century, Salvatore said, and for the first time there was heat in it, real feeling, the wound of a lifetime. Do you know what it is to be the younger brother? To be smarter, harder, more capable in every way, and to watch a chair you were born for handed to a sentimental boy because he came out first. 15 years I watched Vincenzo prepare Marco to give it all away. The mercy, the going legitimate, the laying down of the gun. He was going to make us weak, and weak families die, Sophia. They die slow, and they die ugly, and they take their children down with them. I didn't destroy this family. I saved it. I did the terrible thing so that the family could survive, and I have carried that alone for 20 years, and I have ruled well, and I will not now be undone by a painter and a frightened boy and a dead man's letter. His voice dropped, went almost gentle again. Give me the letter, Sophia. You've lost. Be a Costanzo about it. Raphael spoke, and his voice was arctic. She hasn't lost, Zio. You have. There are 300 people arriving at this house within the hour, the Ferrante among them.
You invited them. You invite them every year to rub their noses in the ports you never gave them. What do you imagine happens when the last daughter of Costanzo stands up in front of the whole organization tonight and reads her grandfather's own hand, naming you as the man who slaughtered your family and cheated the Ferrante for the privilege? You can kill her in this room, but you can't kill what she knows, because I know it too, and Tommaso knows it, and by tonight every capo in that ballroom will know it. You've spent 20 years making sure no one could touch you without proof. She's holding the proof. It's over.
Salvatore looked at Raphael for a long, long moment, and then he smiled, and it was the worst thing Marisol had ever seen, because it was a smile of genuine, warm, uncomplicated affection. "Oh, Raphael," the old man said softly, "you beautiful, stupid boy. You still don't understand, do you? After all these years." He shook his head, almost fond. "You think I don't know how she came to be found? You think a man like me doesn't watch his own heir? The man who found her face in New Orleans, the man you pay to look at faces," he spread his hands. "He works for me, Raphael. He has always worked for me. I let you find her. I let you dig her up out of that little life and carry her home to me on your own private plane and lay her at my feet, because I could never have found her myself. She was hidden too well by someone who loved her 20 years ago. But you found her. You did what I couldn't. And then you brought her right here." The old man's smile widened. "You didn't rescue the last daughter of Costanzo, my boy. You retrieved her. For me. You've been my errand all along." The silence in the study was total. Marisol felt the floor tilt under her. She turned slowly to look at Raphael, and his face had gone the colour of ash, and his eyes, when they came to hers, were full of a horror so absolute that no man alive could have faked it. But the doubt was already in her. Gia's poison. Ask yourself who benefits most. The sick, cold whisper of it. And Salvatore saw the doubt land in her eyes, and his smile became a thing of pure triumph. "There it is," the old man breathed. "There's the crack. That's all I needed, child. Not to kill you. To divide you." He looked between them, the ash-faced boy and the girl with the gun and the letter and the doubt. "You were only ever dangerous together. Sophia," Raphael's voice was very quiet, "look at me, not at him, at me." She looked at him. The gun was still in her hand, and she realized with distant horror that at some point it had drifted, that it was no longer pointing at the door, that it was pointing at nothing, at the space between the two men, at the whole impossible question of who she could trust in a house where the man who'd raised her hopes and the man who'd raised his hand might be the same kind of thing. "He's telling you the truth about the man in New Orleans," Raphael said. "I can see it in your face. You believe him, and you should, because it's probably true. I paid a man to find faces. If Salvatore turned him, I'd never have known. That's exactly the kind of thing he does. So yes, it's possible I was led to you. It's possible I've been his errand for 11 days and never knew it." He did not look away from her. "But look at what he's doing, Sophia, right now, This second, he's not reaching for a gun. He's not calling his men. He's talking, because talking is the only weapon he has left, because the letter's in your hand, and the guests are coming, and the one thing that can save him now is you and me pointing guns at each other instead of at him. He told you himself, you were only ever dangerous together. He's not lying about that either. So he's going to spend the last card he has trying to turn us, and it doesn't matter whether the thing he's using is true or not, because the use he's putting it to is the lie. His voice cracked. I didn't know. I swear to you on my mother's grave, on your mother's grave, on the letter in your hand. I did not know I was being used to find you. But even if I was, Sophia, even if every suspicion Gia planted is true, ask yourself the only question that matters. If I wanted you dead, if I were his creature, why would I bring you the letter? Why would I hand you the one weapon that ends him? I could have let you die at the wall this afternoon and inherited everything. Instead, I'm standing between you and the door with no gun in my hand. Look at where I'm standing. And Maricel looked at where he was standing. He was between her and Salvatore. He had put himself there without thinking, the moment the old man walked in, and he had not moved, and he had no weapon, and if Salvatore's men came through that door, Raphael Costanzo would die first, on purpose, to buy her the seconds to run. That was not the geometry of a man who wanted her dead. Salvatore saw the doubt leave her the way it had come, all at once, and the triumph drained out of his old face, and for the first time something that was almost fear moved across it. "He's right, isn't he?" Marisol said softly to Salvatore, and she raised the gun again, and now it pointed at him, steady, both hands, the way Raphael would tell her later he had never taught her, but she had somehow known. "You don't have your men. You came alone. You came alone because you thought you could talk your way out of a locked room, the way you've talked your way out of everything for 20 years. But there's no talking your way out of your own brother's handwriting." She took a step toward him, and Raphael moved with her, protective, at her shoulder. "You made one mistake, Salvatore. You told me I was a painter, and you meant it as an insult, that I was soft, that I only made pretty pictures of a wall I couldn't remember. But I painted that wall 100 times because some part of me never stopped seeing this house and this family and you. I've been painting my way back to your face my whole life." Her voice did not shake. "And now I can see you completely. Every liar in this family has a version of you they agree to see. I don't. I never did. That's why you're afraid of me. Not the letter, not the blood. Because I'm the one person in the world you can't perform for." Behind them, forgotten, the old Capo Tommaso had straightened against the bookshelves, and he was weeping openly now, and he said in a voice full of 50 years of guilt, "It's true, Don Salvatore. God forgive me. Every word the old Don wrote is true, and I've known it in my heart for 20 years, and I've said nothing, and I'm done saying nothing." He crossed himself. "I'll stand up tonight beside the Signorina. I'll swear to what I heard in Naples in the spring your brother died. And when I do, half that ballroom will stand with me, because half that ballroom loved Marco Costanzo and has waited 20 years for someone to give them a reason." Salvatore's eyes moved from the gun to the letter, to Tommaso, to the ash-faced boy who would not leave the girl's side, and something in the old man seemed to age 10 years in 10 seconds, some engine that had run on certainty for half a century, finally ceasing. "Then we appear to have a problem," he said quietly, and he smiled once more, but it was a different smile now, a smaller and more dangerous one, the smile of a cornered animal that has just remembered it still has teeth. "You've all made the same charming mistake. You think I came to this room alone because I underestimated you." He reached into his cardigan, slowly, letting them see, a man too old and soft to be quick, and drew out not a gun, but a small black remote with a single red button, and he held it up between 2 fingers. "I came to this room alone, children, because I never intended to walk out of it. I built this house as a copy of the one where they died. Did you never wonder why a man would do such a thing?" His thumb hovered over the button. "Because I always knew that someday it might have to burn the same way." The world narrowed to the red button under an old man's thumb. "There's enough gas in the walls of this wing to level it," Salvatore said, almost conversationally. "I had it built in when I built the house. A man in my position learns that the most important room in any building is the one you can erase. If I press this, the old wing comes down, and everything in it, the ledgers, the letter, the witness, the last daughter of Costanzo and her devoted cousin, becomes a tragedy. A gas leak on the very day of the feast. The family will weep. I will weep. I'm good at weeping, as you've all noticed." His thumb caressed the button. "So, here is where we are. You have my brother's letter. I have all our lives. Shall we discuss terms?" Marisol's mind raced, the letter in one hand, the gun in the other. Raphael, a half step in front of her, coiled, calculating the distance to the old man and finding it too far. Tommaso, frozen against the shelves. "You won't do it," Marisol said. "You love this too much. The chair, the family, the performance. You've spent 20 years building a life on being the one who survived, the peacemaker, the good uncle. You won't blow yourself up in a study to spite 3 people." "Wouldn't I?" Salvatore's eyes glittered. "I'm 79 years old, child. I've had my life. I've had the chair for 20 years, and it was everything I dreamed, and I regret nothing. The only thing I cannot bear, the only thing, is to have it taken from me by my brother's sentimental blood, to be remembered as the man who was undone at the end by a painter." His voice hardened. "I would burn 100 houses before I'd let you weep at my funeral the way you promised. So, the letter. Slide it across the floor to me, and I let the boy and the old man walk out. You stay. Just you. A private conversation between family. That's my offer, and it's generous, and it expires when I lose my patience, which is soon." "No," Raphael said. "It wasn't addressed to you, boy. She's not staying in this room." Raphael's voice was flat and final. "You'll have to take us all, Salvatore, because she does not stay in this room without me. I told her I'd bury everyone I love before I let anything happen to her, and I meant the order of it. I go first. That's not negotiable. That was never negotiable. And Marisol, listening to him, felt the last of Gia's poison burn away entirely, because a creature of Salvatore's, an errand boy playing a part, does not offer to die first in a room with a bomb. He simply lets the girl slide the letter across the floor and walks out to inherit. "Raphael," she said quietly, "don't." "Too late," he said, and did not look at her, because he could not look at her and do what he was about to do. "Zio, you want the letter. Here's a better offer. You said you never meant to walk out of this room. Neither did I, once I understood what you were." And he took a step toward the old man, one, then another, closing the distance, hands loose and open at his sides, a man walking calmly toward a bomb. "You press that button, you take all of us. But if I reach you before you press it, I take only you. Your choice, old man. How badly do you want to be sure?" It was a bluff, and it was not a bluff, and everyone in the room knew it, and Salvatore's thumb pressed down on the button. Nothing happened. For one heartbeat, nothing happened, and Salvatore's face went slack with confusion, and he pressed the button again, and then Tommaso spoke from the shadows by the bookshelves in a voice that shook with 50 years of grief finally set down. "I disconnected it this morning," the old man said. "The gas. When they gave me the morning watch on the old wing," he wept as he said it. "I've known about that button for 15 years, Don Salvatore. I helped the men install the lines. I never thought you'd use it. But I'm an old soldier, and I check my ground. And this morning, God moved my hand, and I disconnected it before I even knew why. Before the Signorina came, before any of this." He crossed himself again. "I think I've been waiting 15 years to disconnect that button. I just never had a reason to be brave until she came home." And Salvatore Costanzo stood in the ruin of his last card, an old man holding a dead remote, and for the first time in the memory of anyone present, he had nothing left to say. Raphael crossed the last of the distance and took the useless remote out of his uncle's soft old hand, almost gently, and looked at him, with 20 years of buried grief in his cold eyes, and said, "You should have stayed dead too, Zio. But you didn't. So now she gets to weep at your funeral. She promised you she would." He stepped back to Marisol's side and put his hand at the small of her back, that claiming, protective hand, and said to her, low, "It's yours to finish, not mine. He killed your blood. What happens to him now is your right, not mine. Whatever you decide, I'm with you." Marisol looked at the old man, the murderer of her mother, her father, her grandfather, 40 people at a christening, and his own daughter within the hour. And she raised the gun, and her hand was steady, and Salvatore did not beg, he only looked at her with those flat, patient, dead eyes, and waited to see what kind of Costanzo she truly was. And she lowered the gun. "No," Marisol said, "that's what you want. That's the last performance. The daughter who becomes what you are, the blood that proves your point. You said my father would have made the family weak with mercy. You want me to prove you right by being merciless.
You want to die knowing you turned the last Costanzo into a murderer in a study, exactly like you." She lowered the gun the rest of the way. "I'm not going to give you that. I'm not going to shoot you in a locked room and become a story someone tells about how the peacemaker's death was really a mercy, how the girl was just as bad as him in the end. No." She turned to Tommaso. "You said half that ballroom loved my father. You said they've waited 20 years for a reason to stand up." She held up her grandfather's letter.
"Then let's give them one. In the light, in front of everyone. Let 300 people watch Salvatore Costanzo answer for what he did. Out loud, with witnesses, with proof. The way my grandfather begged in this letter. Make him answer. Not a bullet in a room no one sees. An answer. In front of everyone he ever performed for." She looked at Salvatore, and it was the cruelest thing she could have done to him, and she knew it. "You wanted a private conversation between family. I want the opposite. I want an audience." Salvatore's face, for the first time, showed something like real terror. Because a bullet he could have taken like a man, but this, the light, the audience, the end of the performance in front of everyone he had spent 20 years deceiving, this was the one death he could not bear. "You wouldn't," he whispered. "The family. You tear it apart. There are children, businesses, the whole—" "The family tore itself apart 20 years ago at a christening," Marisol said. "I'm just going to show everyone the tear. What they build after that is up to them. But it's not going to be built on a lie about you anymore." She turned to Raphael. "Get the ledgers, all of them, the photographs, everything in this room that proves what he did. We're carrying it into that ballroom tonight in front of 300 people, and Tommaso is going to stand up and swear to what he knows, and I am going to read my grandfather's letter out loud in the house Salvatore built to hide it, and then we're going to let the family decide what happens to the man who butchered 3 generations of it." She looked back at Salvatore. "You always hid behind the family, so the family gets to be the one that finds you. That's not my mercy, Zio. That's my justice. My father's kind, the clean kind. It turns out I'm my father's daughter, after all." Raphael was looking at her as if he had never seen anything like her in his life, and perhaps he hadn't. He moved to gather the ledgers, fast and methodical, and Tommaso came to help him, and Marisol kept the gun loosely on Salvatore, who had sunk into the great desk chair, suddenly and entirely an old man, all the terrible vitality gone out of him. "They won't believe you," Salvatore said, but there was no force in it now. "I have had 20 years to make them love me." "Then we'll see whether love survives handwriting," Marisol said. They were nearly ready. The ledgers in a leather satchel, the photographs, the letter safe in Marisol's coat, when Salvatore, from the depths of the chair, began, very softly, to laugh. It was a terrible sound, wet and low, and it raised the hair on Marisol's arms. "Oh, you clever girl," he said. "You clever, clever girl. You've thought of everything. The light, the audience, the letter. You're going to walk into my ballroom and destroy me in front of the whole organization." He lifted his head, and his eyes were bright and wet and horribly delighted. There's only one thing you haven't thought of. One little thing." He smiled at her, and the performance was back, the warmth, the fondness, and it was more frightening now than the terror had been. "You keep saying, 'The family will decide,' as if the family is one thing, as if it's a jury of good men waiting for the truth." He shook his head slowly. "Half that ballroom, child, are men I made rich, men whose sons I set up in business, men who owe everything they have to me and nothing to the ghost of a merciful Don who died 20 years ago. You think you're walking in to accuse me. You're walking into a room that is one half people who loved your father and one half people who will lose everything if I fall, and who will therefore decide in the space of a heartbeat that the letter is a forgery, that the old man Tommaso is senile, and that the two of you are impostors making a play for the chair." His smile widened. "You're not walking into a trial, Sophia. You're walking into a civil war. And the moment you read that letter aloud, this family splits down the middle in a room full of armed men, and the blood that gets spilled will be on your hands, not mine." "So," he spread his hands, delighted, alive again. "Shall we? Let's go to the party. Let's see how many people die tonight because the painter needed her audience." And Marisol stood there, with the letter in her coat and the satchel of proof in Raphael's hand, and understood that Salvatore had just found, in the wreckage of all his other cards, the one that might still be true, that justice in the light might cost more lives than a bullet in the dark, and that she had perhaps just chosen, out of principle, to start the very war she'd hoped to end. Raphael saw her waver. He came to her, satchel in hand, and said the truest thing anyone said that entire terrible day. "He's doing it again," Raphael said quietly. "Even now. He's found a new way to make you doubt. He can't win, so he's trying to make you flinch, because a flinch is the only victory he has left. Yes, it's dangerous. Yes, some of them owe him everything. But Sophia, you don't have to convince the ones he bought. You only have to give the ones who loved your father permission to move. That's all justice ever is. Permission for good people to finally do the thing they've been too afraid to do alone." He held her eyes. "You're not starting the war. The war started 20 years ago. You're just the first person brave enough to fight it in the daylight. Let's go end it." The ballroom of the Costanzo house was built to make men feel small before power, and on the night of the feast of San Gennaro it did its work. 300 people in silk and diamonds under chandeliers the size of cars, a stage where a band played old Neapolitan songs, waiters with silver trays, and everywhere, in the corners, along the walls, the still, watchful men in dark suits who were the true furniture of that family. Marisol stood in the doorway in a black dress Gia had chosen for her weeks ago. She had not known, choosing it, that she would not live to see it worn. And she felt the whole weight of what she was about to do settle onto her shoulders. Raphael was at her side with the leather satchel. Tommaso came behind, straight-backed, an old soldier, walking to what might be his last battle. And somewhere in that glittering crowd, escorted by his men, wearing his cardigan and his warm, sad smile, moved Salvatore Costanzo, working the room, being loved, buying time. "He's telling them a story right now," Raphael murmured. "Whatever we do, He's already ahead of it. He'll have decided which men to whisper to, which ones to warn. We have to move before he finishes. The Ferrante, Marisol said. You said they're here. Which ones? Raphael's eyes moved across the room and stopped on a knot of men near the terrace doors, hard, well-dressed, apart from the rest, watched by the Costanzo guards and watching back. There, the tall one with the grey at his temples, is Enzo Ferrante. His father made the deal with Salvatore 20 years ago. Enzo spent his whole life knowing his family did something unspeakable for Salvatore and never got paid for it. And he's never known the details, only the grudge. He looked at her. If your grandfather's letter is true, then Salvatore made Enzo's family into butchers and then cheated them. That letter doesn't just hurt Salvatore, it hands the Ferrante a 20-year-old wound and a reason. If you want the room to move, you don't start with the men who loved your father. You start with the man who has the most rage and the least to lose. Marisol looked across the glittering room at Enzo Ferrante, and she understood the terrible arithmetic of it. That to get justice, she was going to have to put a weapon in the hand of a killer's son. That there was no clean version of this. That her father's clean way had gotten him slaughtered at a christening. She thought of Salvatore's laughter in the study. You're not walking into a trial. You're walking into a civil war. And then she thought of her mother's body over hers and a servant's note. La piccola vive. Get her out before Salvatore knows. And she thought of Gia weeping in a grey kitchen, finding her courage an hour too late. And she stopped waiting to feel ready, because she understood at last that no one who does the necessary thing ever feels ready. That readiness is a story cowards tell to explain why they waited. Get me to the stage, she said, when the band stops between songs. And Raphael, she caught his hand. Whatever happens when I start talking, however bad it gets, don't put yourself between me and a bullet. I mean it. I didn't come home to watch you die for me the way my mother did. Promise me. I can't promise you that, Raphael said, and kissed her knuckles and did not promise. The band brought a song to its end. In the pause, before the next began, Marisol Costanzo walked to the stage in her black dress with a dead man's letter in her hand. And she took the microphone from the startled singer, and 300 of the most dangerous people in America turned to look at the miracle who had come home. My name, she said, and her voice did not shake, and it filled the enormous room, is Sofia Costanzo. 20 years ago, at a christening in Sicily, someone in this family murdered 40 of my blood, including my mother, my father, and my grandfather, the Don Vincenzo, whom many of you served. A murmur, a stirring, 100 faces going still. I was 3 years old. I lived because my mother covered me with her body. I was hidden in America by someone who loved this family enough to keep me alive, and I grew up with no name, no memory, and no idea who I was. She lifted the letter. This is a letter. My grandfather wrote it, in his own hand, in the weeks before he died. He hid it because he was afraid, and he was right to be afraid. It names the man who made a deal with the Ferrante family of Naples, the ports of 2 cities, in exchange for the men who did the killing. It names the man who then cheated the Ferrante of everything he promised them. It names the man who has ruled this family for 20 years by weeping at the graves of the people he ordered slaughtered. The room had gone utterly silent now, 300 people not breathing. Across the floor, she saw Salvatore's men begin, slowly, to move. She saw Enzo Ferrante's head come up like a wolf catching a scent. "I'm going to read it to you, in my grandfather's own words, and then you can decide for yourselves what kind of family you want to be." And she began to read. She read her grandfather's letter aloud in the house Salvatore had built to bury it, and the words fell into the silent ballroom like stones into still water, and the ripples changed everything they touched. "My brother Salvatore intends to kill me and take the family. A deal with the Ferrante of Naples. He will give them the ports in exchange for the men to do a thing that cannot be undone. He will hide behind the family. He will weep at our graves. Do not believe the weeping." When she reached her grandfather's signature, in fear and in sorrow before God, she looked up, and the room had transformed. Half of it had turned towards Salvatore with the slow, terrible dawning of people rearranging 20 years of belief in real time, and the other half, the men he had made rich, the ones with everything to lose, had gone hard and blank, and had begun unmistakably to reach inside their jackets. Salvatore stepped forward into the open floor, and he was magnificent. She had to give him that. He was magnificent in his ruin. He spread his arms, and he laughed warmly, and he said in a voice pitched to carry, my friends, look at what grief does. Look at what a clever enemy does with a broken girl." He shook his head, sorrowful, indulgent. "This poor child, and she is a Costanzo. The blood is real, I don't dispute it. This poor child has been found by our enemies and filled with a forged letter and a beautiful story, and turned into a weapon against the family that loves her. Ask yourselves, who profits if I fall? Who has schemed for 20 years to break the peace I built?" He turned, slowly, and pointed one soft old finger across the room. "Him. My own nephew. Raphael, who inherits everything the moment I'm gone. Raphael, who found this girl. Raphael, who forged this letter. It's an old story, my friends, the oldest, the ambitious nephew, the invented heir, the play for the throne. I am an old man, weeping for my murdered family, and they are 2 children with a forgery, making a grab for power over your children's graves." "It's not a forgery." The voice was old and cracked, and it came from the floor of the ballroom, and it belonged to Tommaso, who had climbed onto a chair so that 300 people could see him, an ancient capo with a scar through his eyebrow, weeping, straight-backed. "I am Tommaso Ricci," he said. 51 years I have served this family. Many of you have known me your whole lives. Your fathers knew me. I held some of you as babies." He was shaking, but his voice carried. "In the spring of the year, Don Vincenzo died. I drove Salvatore Costanzo to Naples myself. I waited outside a room in the harbor while he made a deal with old man Ferrante. I did not know then what the deal was. I learned it 3 months later at a christening when men came over the wall." He crossed himself, and tears ran freely down his old face. "I have carried it for 20 years. I told myself the dead were dead. I told myself I was only a soldier. and I watched this man weep at the graves of the people he sent me to help him kill, and I said nothing, because I was a coward, and I am done being a coward." He turned to the crowd, to the half that had gone hard, to the men reaching into their jackets. "The letter is true. I swear it before God and before all of you, and on the 51 years I gave this family. Salvatore Costanzo butchered Don Vincenzo and Don Marco, and 40 of our blood, and every one of you who reaches for a gun to protect him is reaching to protect the man who would have killed your own father if your father had stood between him and that chair." The room broke. It broke the way ice breaks, a single crack becoming a web, becoming a collapse. Someone shouted. Somewhere a woman screamed. The men who had been reaching into their jackets drew their guns and found, in the same instant, that a dozen other men had drawn on them, old capos and their soldiers, the ones who had loved Marco, the ones who had waited 20 years, and for one long, frozen heartbeat, the ballroom of the Costanzo house was 300 people and 100 guns, and no one moving. The whole family balanced on the edge of the civil war Salvatore had promised. And into that frozen moment walked Enzo Ferrante. He crossed the floor, unhurried, guns tracking him from every direction, and he walked directly up to Salvatore Costanzo, and he looked down at the old man, and the whole room held its breath to hear what the son of the butcher would say. 20 years, Enzo Ferrante said quietly. My family has lived under a shame we could not name. My father did a thing for you, and would never tell me what, and drank himself to death carrying it, and left me only a hatred with no shape. He looked at the letter in Marisol's hand across the room, and then back at Salvatore. Now it has a shape. You made my father a butcher, and then you cheated him of the ports you promised, and you let my family carry the sin while you kept the reward. His voice never rose. I did not come to this feast for your peace, Costanzo. I have never come for your peace. I came every year to look at your face and try to understand my father's shame. Now I understand it. He turned to the room, to the men with guns, to both halves of the shattered family, and he said the thing that decided everything. The Ferrante will not lift a hand to defend Salvatore Costanzo, and any man in this room who does, any man who spills blood tonight to protect the animal who did this, the Ferrante will consider him our enemy for the next 20 years. He looked back down at the old man. You built your whole life on people being too afraid of each other to unite against you. Look around, old man. It stopped working. And the guns, all across the ballroom, slowly, one by one, began to lower. It did not end cleanly, because nothing in that family ended cleanly, but it ended. The men Salvatore had bought looked at the men who had loved Marco, and looked at the Ferrante standing with the accusers, and did the arithmetic that their whole lives had trained them to do, and they lowered their guns, because there was no profit in dying for a finished man. Salvatore Costanzo, who had ruled by keeping everyone divided, watched the room unite against him in real time, and understood, at last and completely, that he had lost, not to a bullet, not to a letter, but to the one thing he had spent 20 years preventing, people ceasing to be afraid of each other long enough to look at him together. They took him quietly in the end, Old capos who had served his brother, men whose hands shook with rage and grief, closed around him and led him from the ballroom. And he did not struggle, and he did not weep. The performance was finally entirely over, and without it, there was almost nothing left of him, just a small, soft old man being walked out of the great room he had built to overawe. At the door he stopped and turned, and found Marisol across the crowd. "You didn't shoot me," he called, and his voice in the vast, quieting room was almost wondering. "You could have. In the study. It would have been so much simpler. Why didn't you?" And Marisol, standing on the stage with her grandfather's letter still in her hand, gave him the truest answer she had. "Because my father wouldn't have," she said. "And you spent 20 years telling everyone he was weak for it. I wanted the whole family to watch me prove you wrong." They took him away. What happened to Salvatore Costanzo after that door was a thing the family decided in rooms Marisol was not in and did not ask about, because she had learned that much already, that some justice happens in the light and some in the dark, and that she had done her part in the light and did not need to own the rest. She would only say, years later, when someone asked, that he had lived long enough to weep at no more graves, and that she had not, in the end, wept at his. The ballroom emptied slowly, 300 people leaving with a story that would be told for 50 years, and at last it was only the two of them on the stage, under the enormous chandeliers, Marisol and Raphael, and the leather satchel of proof, and the long, strange silence that comes after a war ends. "You did it," Raphael said. He was looking at her the way he had looked at her lit window from a car in the rain, 11 days and a lifetime ago. "You walked into the most dangerous room in America with a piece of paper, and you took down the man I couldn't touch in 20 years. With a letter, Sophia. With words." "With everyone," she corrected. "Tommaso, Enzo, Gia. God, Gia!" And her voice broke finally on the name. The grief she'd had no room for all day flooding in at last. "She's dead, Raphael. She died an hour after she found her courage. She gave me the key, and he killed her for it, and I never even—" He crossed the stage and pulled her into him and held her, and this time there was nothing careful about it. No Bible's width of distance, no locked door and running water, no house full of wolves. He held her while she wept for the cousin she'd known for 3 weeks, and the mother she'd never known at all, and the whole impossible weight of a family reclaimed and mourned in a single day. And he did not tell her it was all right, because it was not all right. Some of it would never be all right. He only held her and let her be, for the first time in her life, a person who was allowed to fall apart, because someone strong enough to hold her had decided never to let go. "I have to tell you something," Raphael said into her hair when the worst of it had passed. "About the man in New Orleans, the one who found you, the one Salvatore said was his." He pulled back to look at her. "I've been thinking about it all day, about whether it's true. And Sophia, I think it probably is. I think Salvatore turned him, and I think I was led to you, and I think in some terrible way the old man was right that I did his errand for him without knowing it." His jaw tightened. "I need you to hear me say it plainly. in the light, now that it's over, so you never have to wander in the dark. It's possible I only found you because he let me, but—" and here his cold, beautiful face came completely undone. "The moment I saw you in that window, painting a house you couldn't remember, everything he intended stopped mattering. He wanted me to retrieve a weapon. I found you, and there is no version of the last 3 weeks, no version of anything where I don't choose you over that chair, over the family, over my own life, over everything. He used me to find you. He could not use me to stop loving you." That's the one thing in this whole house he never understood, that a man can be a fool and a pawn and still underneath it be exactly what he says he is. He held her face. "I love you, Sophia. I loved you in the doorway. I've loved you every night I slept on your floor keeping watch. Whatever brought me to your window, I stayed for you. I'll always stay for you." Marisol looked up at him, tears still wet on her face, in the emptied ballroom of the house that had tried to kill her. And she understood that she had come home not to a place. The place was a copy, a trophy, a crime, but to a person. This one. This cold, dangerous, obsessive, devoted man who had looked for her for 20 years and stayed for her the moment he found her. "Then take me somewhere I'm going to wake up," she said, echoing his own words back to him, the promise from all those nights ago. "You said when you had me for the first time, you wanted it to be somewhere you knew I'd wake up. Take me there, Raphael. We're free. Ask me again." And Raphael Costanzo, for the second time in his life, obeyed her. The penthouse was in Manhattan, 60 floors above the city, glass on every side. And when Raphael brought her there in the small hours after the feast, Marisol understood that this was his real place, the one thing that was only his in a life that had belonged to the family since he was 9 years old. "No one comes here," he said, watching her take it in. The city spread out below them like a fallen galaxy, the quiet, the safety of altitude. "Not the family, not anyone. I bought it with money that isn't theirs, in a name that isn't mine, years ago, for a reason I never let myself say out loud." He came to stand behind her at the glass, close, not touching, always giving her the room. "The reason was this. I always thought, if I ever find her, if she's alive, if I ever find her and I'm not too late, I'll need somewhere in the world that the family has never touched, where I can take her, where she'll be safe, where she can wake up." His voice was very low. "I bought you a home 4 years before I found you, Sophia. I just never knew if you'd live to see it." Marisol turned around in the circle of his nearness and put her hands flat against his chest, over the heart she had once felt hammering under her palm in a house full of wolves. "Ask me again," she said. And he did. And this time there was no line to hold, no house to bury her in, no war to survive first. There was only the two of them, 60 floors above a sleeping city, in the one place in the world that had never belonged to anyone but him and, now, her. And the way he touched her, when he finally allowed himself to touch her, was the way a man touches something he has spent his whole life believing he had lost. Reverent and starving at once. His hands learned her slowly, as if committing her to memory, as if some part of him still could not believe she was real and had to keep confirming it. The curve of her jaw, The small of her back, where his hand had claimed her all those times in that dangerous house, now claiming her for no one's eyes but hers.
"I dreamed about this," he confessed against her skin, and there was wonder in it, and grief, and a want so total it undid her. "I told myself I didn't. For 20 years I told myself I was only looking for the child, for justice, for the family's lost daughter. And then I saw you in that window, and I understood I'd been lying to myself for years, that somewhere along the way, looking for you stopped being a duty and became the only thing that kept me alive. You were a ghost I'd fallen in love with, and now you're here, and you're warm, and you're real, and I don't—" His voice broke. "I don't know how to want anything else ever again. I'm never going to. You should know that about me. You should know exactly what you're taking on. I love the way the ocean is deep, with no bottom to it, and no other side. It will make me possessive, and it will make me jealous, and it will make me impossible. And I will spend the rest of my life making sure no one ever hurts you again. And some days that will be too much, and I need you to tell me when it's too much, because I won't always know." "I know," Marisol said, and she was crying and laughing at once. "I've known since the doorway. I've never been afraid of how much you feel, Raphael. I spent my whole life being the girl no one came for. Do you understand what it is to be that girl, and then to find a man who looked for 20 years? She pulled his forehead down to hers. "You're not too much. You're exactly enough. You're the first thing in my whole life that's ever been enough." Afterward, they lay tangled in the dark, with the city glittering below, and she traced the scars on him she hadn't known were there. A life in that family left marks. And he told her the stories behind each one, quietly, things he had never told anyone, and she gave him her own in return. The foster homes, the group homes, the long grey corridors, the paintings of a wall she couldn't remember. And somewhere in the telling, two people who had each been profoundly, differently alone their whole lives stopped being alone, and neither of them said it out loud, because it did not need to be said. "What happens now?" Marisol asked, when the sky had begun to grey at the edges. "To the family, to all of it. Someone has to. There's the businesses, the men, the whole—" "Yes," Raphael said. "Someone has to. And it's going to be you, Sophia, because you're the blood, and because after tonight there isn't a capo in the organisation who'd follow anyone else. You're the last daughter of Costanzo. You brought down the man none of us could touch. They'll follow you into anything." He propped himself on an elbow and looked down at her. And there was something careful in his face now, something that had been waiting. "But here's what I've been afraid to ask you all night. Your father wanted to make the family clean. He died for it. Your grandfather's letter says so. It's in you, too. I've watched it. The way you refused to shoot Salvatore. The way you insisted on the light instead of the dark." He touched her face. "You could do what your father couldn't. You have the one thing he never had. A family that just watched with its own eyes what the old way costs. You could take that chair and use it to end the thing that killed everyone you came from. Slowly. Carefully. The clean way. It would be dangerous, and it would take years, and it would be the hardest thing anyone's ever tried." He held her eyes. "Or you could walk away. Right now.
Take my hand and disappear, and let the family tear itself apart over the empty chair. And we could be no one, somewhere warm, and you could paint. I told you in New Orleans I'd let you disappear. That offer never expired. It never will. He kissed her softly. I'll love you exactly the same either way, empress or nobody. I just need you to choose it with your eyes open. I've had enough of people being used without their knowing. Never you, never again. She thought about it for 3 days. He gave her the 3 days without a single word of pressure, which was its own kind of love, from a man built the way he was built, a possessive, consuming man, deliberately holding his whole nature still so that the most important decision of her life could be hers and only hers. He cooked for her in the glass penthouse. He let her paint. He'd had her easel and her paints brought from New Orleans without being asked, and she stood at the glass 60 floors up and painted, for the first time in her life, something that was not the villa, not the wall, not the house she couldn't remember. She painted the city at dawn, she painted the future. And on the 3rd day, she told him. I'm going to take the chair, she said. They were on the terrace in the early light, and he went very still, and she watched him master the fear for her that leapt into his face, watched him choose, visibly, to trust her judgment over his terror. Tell me why, he said, not to change it. I just want to understand the woman I'm going to follow. Because of Gia, Marisol said, because of Tommaso, because of the servant who carried me out of the fire and hid me for 20 years. She looked out over the waking city. This family is full of people who spent their whole lives being cowards because they were alone and afraid, and who found their courage the moment someone gave them permission and something to stand beside. Gia found it an hour before she died. Tommaso found it after 50 years. Enzo found it in one night. She turned to him. My father tried to make the family clean, and he did it alone, in secret, and they killed him for it before anyone even knew what he wanted. I'm not going to do it alone, and I'm not going to do it in secret. I'm going to do it in the light, with the whole family watching, the way I did with Salvatore. I'm going to give 300 cowards permission to be brave, a little at a time, for years, until there's nothing left of the old way but the stories we tell to make sure it never comes back. She took his hands. And I can't do it without you. I'm not asking you to protect me, Raphael. I have men to protect me now. I'm asking you to build it with me. The clean thing. The impossible thing my father died for. I want to do it with the last Costanzo man at my side, not behind me, not in front of me. Beside me. Raphael looked at her for a long moment, and then he did something she had never seen him do. He smiled, a real smile, unguarded, and 20 years fell off his face, and she saw for one instant the 9-year-old boy who had survived a fever and a massacre and had been carrying the dead ever since. My father used to say the family was a curse that ran in the blood, he said. That there was no escaping it, that we'd all die inside it, the way our fathers did. He raised her hands and kissed them. He was wrong. It's not a curse in the blood. It's a choice, made over and over by frightened people who think they have no other choice. And you just proved you can make a different one, in front of everyone, and live. He pulled her close. Yes, I'll build it with you, beside you, for the rest of my life. I found you to save you, Sophia, and it turns out you're the one who's going to save all of us, even me, especially me. They were married in the spring, in a small church in the Hudson Valley, with old Tommaso as a witness, weeping through the whole ceremony, and Enzo Ferrante in a back pew as an unlikely guest, and 300 members of a family that was, slowly and painfully and imperfectly, learning to become something other than what it had been. Marisol wore her mother's ring, recovered at last from a bank box her grandfather had left, and Raphael's hands shook when he put it on her finger, this cold, dangerous man, undone entirely by a girl he'd found in a lit window in the rain. There were hard years after, of course there were. You do not unmake 100 years of blood in a season. And there were men who resisted, and dangers, and nights when Raphael's possessive terror for her safety threatened to consume them both, and she had to remind him over and over, gently, that she was not her mother, that she was not going to die under a table while men walked through the rooms, that he had found her, and she was staying found. And there were nights when the old dream came back to her, the men with guns, the weight of her mother's body, and she woke screaming, and he was always there, on the floor, with his back against the bed, keeping watch, saying, "I'm here, you're 60 floors up, in a place the family never touched. It's the year of our Lord, and no one is coming through that door." Until her breathing slowed. But they built it. The clean thing. Year by year the businesses turned legitimate, the guns fell silent. The old capos aged out and were replaced by men who had only ever known the new way, and the story of the night the last daughter of Costanzo brought down the butcher with a letter and a room full of borrowed courage became a legend the family told its children, and then a legend the children half believed, and then simply the way things had always been. And on the anniversary, every year, Marisol painted the villa. Not the copy in the Hudson Valley, that she'd had torn down, the trophy, the crime, replaced with a garden and a stone that named all 41 of the dead. She painted the real one, the one in Sicily, the one that had burned, the one she'd painted her whole life without knowing why. But now she knew why, and now the painting was always finished, always right, because she was no longer painting her way back to a house she couldn't remember. She was painting her way home, and she was already there. She hung the finished painting in the glass penthouse where no one but the two of them ever came, and Raphael would find her looking at it sometimes in the early light, and he would come and stand behind her, close, his hand at the small of her back, claiming, protecting, staying, the way he had promised in a house full of wolves that he always would. And neither of them would say anything, because the truly important things do not need to be said. She had come home, not to a place, to him. And the whispers from the graveyard, at last, went quiet.